Hi students, today we are going to discuss the transportation in human beings, and we have already learned in the previous classes our body circulates oxygen, food, salts and other minerals throughout our body, which is transported through a medium called blood. So blood is being a connective tissue. So the cells are suspended in the tissues. The transportation is carried out not only by the blood, and it is carried out by a system called circulatory system. The main organs of that circulatory system are heart, which act as a pumping system, and then blood, that is the circulating fluid, and the blood vessels. So these are the main components of circulatory system. And let us see what are the things circulated through the blood and how does it work. So we see that oxygen enters into the lung, and then from the lung the oxygen is circulated or supplied to each and every cells of the body. At the same time, the carbon dioxide, which is as a waste, is brought back into the lungs and is to be released outside the body. And these two, oxygen is mixed with the blood and then circulated, and carbon dioxide is also circulated by dissolving in it. The oxygen is dissolved by the red blood cells and the pigment we call hemoglobin, and carbon dioxide is dissolved in plasma. So that is another fluid present in the blood, and the plasma dissolves carbon dioxide, salts and other substances and circulated throughout the body. Then these two are not mixed together, and they are separated, and they are circulating separately, and the exchange of these gases take place in the lungs. As we said, the diffusion is not sufficient for an organism has large body. Then another system is, or force is required to pump the blood. Then an organ is required to pump the blood throughout the body, and this pumping system is our heart. Our heart pumps the blood throughout the body so that there is sufficient things, or the necessary things can be supplied to each and every cells of the body. And let us see how does it happen. Our heart is a muscular organ, and its size is as much as our fist, because both oxygen and carbon dioxide are circulating throughout the body, and this heart has different chambers preventing the oxygen mixing from the carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide reaches to the lung to be removed, and the oxygen rich blood is brought and supplied to each and every cells of the body. So in order to carry out this function, our heart has 4 chambers: left atrium, left ventricle; right atrium, right ventricle. And these left and right ventricles are separated by a thick wall called septum, and the walls of these ventricles are thick because they are pumping the blood. They are applying exerts much higher pressure on its walls, so the walls of these ventricles are thick, and comparatively the walls of atrium. Then the oxygenated blood reaches to the left atrium. As it receives the blood, it relaxes, and when left atrium contracts, then the blood is transferred to the left ventricle. So as it receives, it relaxes, the left ventricle relaxes, and a valve is present in between these two, left and atrium and left ventricle, and this valve is in such a way that it always allows the blood to flow in one direction. It's a unidirectional valve. It makes sure that the blood does not flow back. Then when this ventricle contracts, then the blood is pumped out of the heart with a pressure, and this pump is taken through the arteries to the different parts of the body. When this oxygenated blood is pumped out, then the ventricle relaxes, contracts, the ventricle contracts and the blood is pumped out. Then this movement is known as ventricular systole. When the blood rich of carbon dioxide is brought into the right atrium of the heart, then as it enters into the right atrium, then it relaxes, and then the blood received by the right atrium, and then as the right atrium contracts, then the valve is opened, and this valve also unidirectional, and the valve then transfer the blood from the right atrium to the right ventricle. So as the blood enters, the right ventricle relaxes and it receives the blood. Then when the right atrium contracts, then the contraction of this right atrium is known as diastolic movement, and when it contracts or during the diastolic movement, then the blood is pumped out through the aorta and then taken to the lungs to remove the carbon dioxide, or then the blood is then oxygenated or mixed with oxygen, again brought back into the left atrium and again to the left ventricle, and then supplied to the each and every cells of the body, and again the carbon dioxide rich blood brought back into the right atrium and then transferred to the right ventricle and then taken back to the lungs. And this is how the circulation of blood is organized or pumped by our heart. Another component of the circulatory system is blood vessels. The blood vessels consist of arteries, aorta, and small blood capillaries. So the blood capillaries are very, very small tubes so that it can reach each and every cells of the body. And aorta and arteries, they are comparatively larger in size, and so they carry out, arteries always carry away the blood from the heart to the each and every cells of the body, and aorta carries the blood to the lungs for oxygenation. These are the components of circulatory system. As the arteries reaching to an organ or tissues, it may divide into smaller and smaller, and it may divide into a very small blood capillary in order to reach a cell. And this exchange of materials take place in between a thin layer of the cell wall. And again, this blood capillaries, then they combined and again they form veins and taking back the carbon dioxide rich blood back to the heart and then pump to the lungs. So the systolic and diastolic movement of the heart maintain the blood pressure. And what is blood pressure? The force that exerts against the walls of the vessels is called blood pressure. And this is maintained by the systolic and diastolic movement of the pressure. And the systolic movement provides systolic pressure and diastolic movement provides the diastolic pressure. And any leakage of this fluid, or that means the transportation fluid, that is blood, can lead to the loss of that pressure. If the pressure is lost, then the entire circulatory system will be collapsed. So in order to avoid this, the blood, if there is any leakage, for example, if there is a cut on our body and the blood is leaked through the cut, then these cells, blood cells, suddenly around that cut and they clot around that wound and prevent the loss of blood from the body, so that it maintains the leakage, so that it maintains the pressure. Then another type of fluid also involved in the transportation of materials in human beings, and which is called lymph. So lymph is a colorless fluid. During the exchange of the materials between the vessels and the cell wall, through the pores of the cell wall, some of the plasma and blood cells escapes to the capillaries and to form the lymph. Lymph is similar to plasma, but it has proteins and it is colorless. This is all about the transportation of human beings.